Unlimited Potential has been a community benefit society since around 2009. We specialise in what we call social and economic innovation and system change, with experience in diverse social and economic issues in Greater Manchester, including the Live Well agenda. So for anyone that isn't familiar with Salford, where most of this work has taken place, it's a city in Greater Manchester. It's quite a post-industrial city, and there's been a lot of changes in the last 20 years in Salford, and it's been reported that there's been a lot of economic growth happened here as well. And half the city from our last census data showed that half the city's doing really well, and things are changing for a lot of the people in the city. However, we have the other half of the city who are experiencing very high inequality, and experiencing issues in terms of limited growth of wealth and things like that. So, and that's something that we really, really wanted to address. And these kind of images sort of show a kind of two different sides of Salford. And we have a lot of those positive changes that are taking place, but for some reason that those impacts aren't spreading to all of the city equally. And that is something that we really wanted to address and change. So a wee bit more information on kind of that social and economic innovation that I mentioned there before. So what you'll see on the screen is a kind of image around the economic innovation, social and economic innovation process that Unlimited Potential uses with a lot of the work that it does. Our work is rooted in co-production with local people and agencies, and this approach has been born out of many years of that really practical work. So what we do is we often start with what is seen as a kind of really difficult problem or sometimes even an insoluble problem. We work with groups of local people to reframe that, and they kind of then generate and prioritize those ideas, and mobilize around it, and then bring that to system leaders and policymakers and decision makers, who then work in co-production to kind of develop and test a concept and produce a solution together. And then that kind of spreads then into what we hope to see in terms of system change. So that's a really, really short, brief overview of the kind of innovation process that we use with most of our work as well. And more recently, another positive experience that we've had is that this work on growing community wealth was actually listed as a finalist for the Innovation in Politics Awards this year. So we're really pleased to receive that kind of international recognition for our approach to growing community wealth and that impact on inequality. So we just wanted to mention that. So as probably most of us will be aware, that ill health and economic inequality drive each other, and we've seen a real increase in economic inactivity since 2020, especially. And this has kind of been reported on by the Health Foundation and its health inequalities in its 2040 report. And inequalities in health will persist over the next few decades. People in the 10% most deprived areas can expect to be diagnosed with major illness a decade earlier than people in the 10% least deprived areas. And in Salford, what this means is that around half of the population will experience this increase in major illness, and therefore very likely leading to even greater economic inactivity. So we're really working on reshaping the narrative on the economic system. Our current economy was designed, so that means that it can be redesigned as well, and that's a real positive that we should take. And we don't have to be stuck with the economy that we have now. And if we want that better health, we need that economic change. So I want to just go on to show you a really short video that kind of really, I guess, shows us why we're doing what we're doing and really sets the tone for why we really need to see this economic change. So hopefully we tested the sound and it should work for everyone. It's just about a minute long.
I got it, mommy. 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 I
So yeah, I don't think I've seen a kind of more powerful video that kind of shows us why we need to make these changes to our economy as much as we do now and the urgency for us really to do that. So, what is our approach then? What have we been doing in Salford? Well, we spent 3 years co-producing an alternative economic model with local anchor institutions and local people to create a solution to the growing inequality here in Salford specifically. Growing community wealth with a focus on ownership and control was our approach to moving towards a fairer and more inclusive economy that would benefit everyone. Growing community wealth has had success in a variety of places globally and nationally, and it looks different from place to place. So I'm just talking specifically about kind of what we've been doing, but hopefully it kind of sparks maybe some ideas about maybe what would work for in the place that you are as well, or if something similar would. So, with a focus on the local challenges and opportunities that existed, we focused on kind of three main aspects, which were creating the right system conditions, so that kind of policy element, the local anchor institutions, which we sort of refer to as the demand element within this piece of work. And then the work with local people, which we refer to as the kind of supply side, and that will become clear why we use those terms. And so to ensure that all three elements had their role to play in creating a fairer and healthier economy, and all of these three elements really align together and all kind of are as equally as important for this approach to work. So, from the pillars of growing community wealth in Salford, the work we've been doing related most to, I guess, the progressive procurement element and then that plural ownership of the economy as well. And through this work, we really wanted to highlight the skills, experience, resourcefulness, excuse me, and ambitions that exist within local people and communities. And we wanted to match these to the power and resources owned and controlled by agencies. So the policy and system conditions element. So the right system conditions are really important so that we can create an environment that is receptive to change and willing to make changes to the economy to allow everyone to participate and create a healthy life for themselves. And these lie partly in local strategies and policies. So, embedding approaches to growing and sharing power in policy and strategy is key to affecting system change. And this work through the Economies for Healthier Lives, that growing community wealth program, has resulted in spin-off projects for us, like reimagining the purpose of town centres, economics within a child-friendly city, and influencing the Live Well approach across Greater Manchester. And if anyone is interested in any of those spin-off projects that I mentioned there, and they want to see kind of any of the reports or outputs that came from that, please feel free to let us know in the chat, and we're happy to send you some more information on those and what came out of them. But local policy and strategy are being refreshed in Salford this year, so we have a really great opportunity to have this work reflected in these strategies and for the local system to commit to a more inclusive economy and to address those determinants of health and well-being as well. The second element, the local anchor institutions. So the local agencies, we refer to these anchor institutions as those local agencies who are really rooted in a place and they hold a lot of power in regards to their size, spend, and who they employ, and that can have a really significant impact on their local area when they're kind of recognised as these economic entities and they interact with local people in new ways. And in Salford, we established the Salford Local Anchors Network, which consists of kind of 9 local anchor institutions from the public, private, and BCSE sectors. And that was really important for us to have that kind of cross-sector approach so that we could sort of utilise and maximise the power and spend in all of these organisations, regardless of kind of the sector which they're situated in, and we can help them all to recognise their kind of economic power when it comes to growing community wealth and their role in that as well. And some of the examples of local anchor institutions in our network are the council, the hospital, the university, social housing providers, and the local prison and a local land developer as well. But obviously, that will all depend on kind of what is in your area. If you were to set something like this up, we've met with and connected with a lot of local anchors networks across the UK, and they all have kind of very different setups as well, and they all focus on lots of different things. But what we did specifically with these local anchor institutions for this was we analysed the supply chains of some of these local anchor institutions for around 1 year, and we were able to identify at least £10 million of spend within these supply chains within 1 year that was deemed transferable. And what we mean by that is that this money that they were spending, this £10 million, it was identified in only 7 categories. So this is money that's being spent year upon year, regardless of kind of budgets, on goods, works, and services that these anchor institutions needed to run. So things like pest control, food and catering, grounds maintenance, laundry services. And if that money could be spent differently on local or social businesses where it wasn't before, and could be transferable, then this would have a really positive impact on the local area, and they could interact with local and social businesses very differently and more effectively as well. And that's just kind of one way that local anchorage organisations can use their impact in a better way to help grow community wealth. And then finally, the element on this around the third element, which is local people. At the same time as we did the work with the local anchor institutions and the policymakers, we worked with local people to support them to set up social enterprises and learn about this in the areas both identified in the supply chain. So those categories like pest control, food and catering, and laundry services and things like that, pest control, as well as maybe some of their own ideas for local and social businesses as well. But because we had that knowledge of the supply chains, we knew what kind of money was being spent on these goods and services, what sort of work was needed within these categories as well for these very local organisations. And we know that there are already so many resources existing in our communities with people who are skilled, ambitious, driven, and passionate about the place that they live in. And they often, especially in those low wealth areas, lack the connections to entering into business ownership, or the social economy specifically. And that was something that we try to help people learn about as well, those options for more social and cooperative business options too. And we really wanted to work on connecting this to the new and existing opportunities within these local anchor institutions where these sort of connections maybe didn't exist before. So we had anchor institutions looking for more local suppliers that maybe didn't exist, but then these local people with all these skills and ambitions for their future, that and then connecting those two up as well. And so spreading this approach would enable communities to create local supply chains and ecosystems of businesses that are much more likely to recirculate that wealth locally. And such actions could eventually infuse this money into the local economy. So more ownership of businesses by local people can retain that wealth locally, and that was really important. And this can enable local people to develop that collective wealth that maybe doesn't exist there at the moment, and increase resilience and ultimately improve health as well. And what we would say is we're really continually learning about this process of what works and doesn't work. And in terms of we have that concept, and we've been putting that into practice with these local people that we have existing there already, and we have these local anchor institutions that can and want to change their local supply chains. But we are working on kind of I guess, the infrastructure and the support that's needed to allow all of this to happen in practice, and happen successfully as well. But it was really important that we ensured that opportunities for collective businesses were focused in those low wealth areas, and giving these local people the opportunity to own and control a social business specifically. And yeah, so then in terms of the systemic impact, obviously this is a really, really long-term piece of work. So it would be difficult to see, any real systemic impact at this stage. But we are beginning to see kind of those more prominent early impacts. And locally, what's happening for us here is we can really see now a much greater collaboration between economic development and public health, where they've over years been kind of separated. And even at the beginning, when bringing them together, they really recognised that they almost didn't even speak the same language when it came to these things. But now they really have they're developing those real shared priorities and language. And, for example, economic development are really thinking about public health in their kind of regeneration plans. And public health are thinking about those developments and opportunities that are happening locally when developing their kind of health locality plans as well. So that's been a really positive thing that's come out of it. And the quote that we have on the screen here is one that came from the Growth and Reform Network. And they recently evaluated our work with growing community wealth and economies for healthier lives. And they identified that this development is one that is sustainable and could lead to systemic change. So that was a really positive finding for us, an outcome with this kind of external evaluation, and kind of, those sort of comments sort of give you the motivation to keep going with it, and that you've got something that you really can see that systemic change come from. Another element of this, which was really important for us, was around changing the narrative and changing the language around economic growth, and businesses can make it more accessible to a more diverse group of people. And we observed that the language of economics could be intimidating, and people told us it was intimidating to both kind of the public health teams, but also the community of young adults that were getting involved in this work as well. And one of the ways that we tried to get around the kind of anxiety caused by economic framing was to use more organic language, centered on kind of growing the economy and nurturing the economy, and the role of those kind of rooted businesses. And this opened economic development up to people who maybe were excluded from this, but also maybe had excluded themselves as previously as well as not really having a role in that world. And that was kind of conversations that came up again and again with the local young adults that were part of this work with us. They felt at the beginning that they were kind of unqualified to have any role in economic development or changing the economy, that it should be left up to kind of, in their words, professionals and people who know what they're talking about with this sort of thing. Unknowingly that they have been participating in the economy in whatever way that is the whole time. So it was really just about kind of growing that understanding of it and the knowledge of it, and also framing this in a way that allows more people to get involved with it, and it makes it more accessible to people as well. So, in any of the kind of resources that we've created, whether it's the animation or our growers guide, which I can share at the end as well, this you'll see this language reflected in all of that, hopefully, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on whether that is something that you've picked up on, or you feel like you would help in the way that we would like it to as well. Um, so finally, just before we move on to the most important part, hopefully, which will be a discussion. If anybody has any questions about this, there'll be an opportunity in a few moments to go on to that as well. But just before that, I think it would be useful if we had some reflections on it, or maybe some things that we could think about together as well. So, what would it mean to redesign your local economy? What does it currently look like? What changes could be made? And could you see yourself doing something similar? Have you been doing something similar? And what does that mean to you? And also maybe how you could utilize the resources that already exist in your communities and to redesign kind of your place, so that those kind of health inequalities reduce as well. So I'd love to hear about that. And if anybody is doing any similar work or is interested in doing something similar, I'd love to hear about that as well. But yeah, thank